Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. We have wrapped up day 3 of the NFL Draft, and we wanted to jump in here and recap the whole thing. I couldn't do that without my co-host, Jack McCurry, but we do also have Stephen Thomas in here as well, a.k.a. Browns Mock Draft. And, Stephen, have you already done a 2021 mock yet?
I have 3 2023 mocks out already, so, yeah, I'm a little ahead of the game. Now, I have not done anything yet. I have only very basically looked at some of the top 15 names, so I really don't have a clue yet. But I will have one out because I have a disease, so it'll come out pretty soon here in the next day or two. I always do one like right after the draft, the way too silly early mock draft, and then I save it because it's fun to look back. I think last year, like 3 days after the draft last year, my first round pick for the Browns was Javon Kinlaw. So the fact that I picked a guy at a position they ended up needing with a guy who went in the first round, I'm going to take that as a win, so it's always fun.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely positive. I took Alex Leatherwood, which he didn't end up even coming out. So
right.
You see how that goes.
Still a good pick.
But still took a tackle, which I'll settle with that as well. Jack, how are we doing? You kind of catching up on sleep? You awake over there? I know you've kind of been exhausted the last couple nights.
Oh, yeah, I'm good. Got to get back into my normal routine. Got to go back to work tomorrow, so everything's good on my end.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to kind of come back to reality a little bit now that the draft is over. We want to
just in the last 1 minute, guys, since we've been talking, we've got Javonte Moffitt, a safety from Middle Tennessee State, and Jamison Houston, cornerback from Baylor. Both appear to have been UDFA signings in Cleveland.
Oh, nice. That pairs along with offensive tackle, I'm already forgetting the names, Alex Taylor. And then linebacker Solomon Ajayi. So, Steven, before we get to the draft class, just your initial thoughts on those 4 guys, because I know you probably know them more than us.
Actually, no, not really. I mean, they're at positions of need. So, obviously, we're looking at it right. There's a lot of people very unhappy that they didn't take, a different linebacker or didn't address it earlier or whatever. But I mean, it sticks to their plan. They have shown through free agency and everything else that it's not that they don't care, but they're prioritizing other spots and they're willing to get by with specific role players. They've got a linebacker room where guys are good at doing certain parts of the linebacker position, and they're going to try to swap them out, positionally and situationally as they possibly can, much like the Patriots like to do with a lot of their guys at certain positions. So I'm okay with that. But yeah, I mean, if they're inviting them to camp this early, it probably means the guys signed in the first, immediately after, usually guys that they all had draftable grades on. And so, they were hoping they would slide. And if they had pick 244, maybe one of these guys would have ended up being that pick. Although I would have liked them to take Derek Tuska from North Dakota State, and I would like to give a virtual double gun middle finger salute to the Broncos for taking him 2 picks from the end of the draft. That was my number 1 guy I wanted us to grab in UDFA. But yeah, I mean, they're addressing the positions of need. They're going to try to go at least in the depth parts with strength in numbers, and hopefully one of these guys catches fire.
Me and Jack talked last night. You kind of touched on a little bit there about the plan that the Browns and Andrew Berry had going into the draft this weekend, and what they did in free agency really allowed them just to stick to the board, right? They didn't have to panic. They didn't have to, take a flyer on somebody. They didn't have to reach for anybody, at least so we think. Really the only guy that they had to take was an offensive tackle, which they ended up doing in the first round. But when you look at the signings they made in free agency, kind of the patchwork that they did with these 1-year deals for guys like Andrew Sadejo, Carl Joseph, and a couple B.J. Goodson, it just allowed them to not have to panic and not worry about taking and reaching for guys and just sticking to the board and just letting things fall the way they did.
Absolutely. And not only did it allow them to not reach, but it allowed them to manipulate the board and maximize the value of the pick. I know people hear me say that. I'm not the only one, but people hear me say that if you follow me a lot. And perfect example is what they did with pick 41. I mean, obviously, if what they say that Jedrick Wills was their number one tackle and they never thought he would be there is true, they maximized the value of the 10th pick, which, like I always say, sometimes maximizing the value is taking the guy that's staring you right in front of you who you have graded way higher than where you're picking. You look at pick 41, which ended up being pick 44, what they did, they still got the guy they wanted, and they got an extra 5th round pick out of it. So, instead of pick 41 being just Grant Delpit, they got Grant Delpit at 44, and then they got Nick Harris with the pick they picked up in that, who Daniel Jeremiah and Mark Schofield and, people way smarter than I am just raved about. If you were on Twitter during the draft, you saw people thought, oh, what a steal, what a perfect fit, what the numbers that came out about him from PFF and, never gave up a sack and never gave up this. And they loved and loved and loved that pick. That is what's called maximizing the value of the pick. With basically one pick that you turned into two, you got two players who have a chance to make immediate impact. Nick Harris can come in and not only do they need another guy who can snap the ball, but he can come in and immediately challenge, at least get some reps for that right guard spot if the two guys they have in-house don't end up working out. And he's a long-term replacement. He gets a little bit stronger, a little bit, when JC who now is on the north side of 30 in a few years, if they decide to let him go, you got your guy in-house. You draft players before you need them. That's the smart thing to do, and that's maximizing the value of the pick. And then you go to, and I know Jack's going to agree with me wholeheartedly on this one. I've been a huge Jordan Elliott fan since January, and the fact that I would have been, and this is a big admission for me, I would have been no way in hell guy if you said Jordan Elliott at the 88th pick in the draft. I would have been that guy. Because I just can't imagine if you told me 3 days ago that we would get him almost 100 picks into the draft. That's a huge win right there. Plus an extra 3rd round pick next year for, pick 244 in the draft. So, yeah, not only did they not have to reach, I think they played the board and got tremendous, even into today. Harrison was graded a lot higher than where he went on a lot of boards. I just talked about Nick Harris and Donovan Peoples-Jones. McCuper was going on and on about how high he had him, and everybody was saying the same thing. Not a lot of production, which you hope to see. But when you're talking about pick 187, fast dudes who, when they do get the ball, make them their opportunity, that's a heck of a flyer to take right there. Whether he works or not, it's tremendous value for the pick at 187. And this year, if there is a this year, and assuming both of our guys come back healthy, all the reports I've seen have said they are going to, you're going to be asking Peoples-Jones to come in, not do much. He's going to have, go out and be athletic and run around and, let Landry and OBJ take care of most of the heavy lifting. You just go out there and be an athlete while you learn the NFL game. And that's a great spot for him to come in and do. Behind those two guys, because he'll not only learn the game, but he'll learn the work ethic that's necessary to survive in this league.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you just said. Going back to Jordan Elliott, when they originally traded down, Steven, you seemed upset on Twitter, but I feel like now, obviously, looking back, peeling down 14 spots, picking up a 3rd next year, and then getting Jordan Elliott, who you absolutely loved, I would think you really love the move now. 24 hours later?
In the immediate moment, because I didn't think, there was guys sitting there at 74 that I didn't think were going to make it when I saw how far we were dropping. And I also had assumed, much like we had talked for a few days, on Twitter and several pods about, maybe moving down and picking up some extra day 3 picks in that gap between pick 115 and 187. So when they moved down again, I just sort of, before I saw the compensation, I assumed that they would be getting a late 4th, a comp 4th or another 5th or something in that range, because there's a lot of guys in that range that I liked. And when they didn't get that, my immediate reaction was, I don't think that I like this very much at all. But then, when I saw Jordan Elliott drop, I mean, that was a gift right there. But B, when you step back and you look at it and you think about adding future assets and everything, another solid move. My initial reaction was wrong. I'm a man enough to admit it. So I like the move. And as I sat and watched the stuff coming off of the board, I realized that something I like to call a talent plateau, the guys between 80-ish and 105-ish, there wasn't that much of a drop in the grades and rankings that I could see. They were all, pretty much pick your poison, pick your favorite flavor. So even if they had not gotten Jordan Elliott, there was a lot of guys in that range that, who would have been happy with. I just think Jordan Elliott was a gift, the best of the bunch. So, yeah, absolutely. My initial reaction was wrong, and I admit it, and I like the move wholeheartedly.
And the one draft pick you really hadn't touched on yet, Jacob Phillips, the linebacker out of LSU. Talk about what you think of him and how do you think he fits with our defense.
Yeah, if there's and I hate to use this word, but if there's a questionable pick in the bunch, most people seem to be pointing to that one. Some of that has to do with the guy who went immediately after him in Malik Harrison. And for me, a guy who went early today in Michael Walker, if you were going to go for a middle linebacker type, that would have been my preference at that spot. But when you step back and look at it, if that's the worst pick, and again, that's just the word that I'm using, then that's pretty damn good because he's still a pretty solid pick. I mean, that's where I've seen him ranked for months from, on DJ's board and Matt Miller's board and Dane's boards. He's in that 90 to 110 range, right around there. He's an assignment football player. He's not going to make the highlight reels. He's not going to make, SportsCenter's top 10. He's not going to, be a GIF that rolls around Twitter with some, head blasting hit. But he's not going to lose you a football game there either. He is a guy that he knows where he's supposed to be on every play. He knows his responsibility, and he does it. And if the ball carrier is within his sight, he gets him on the ground. He tackles. He tackles in bushelfuls. Not the swiftest guy side to side, but he's not a liability either. So I think the fact that you have him there allows you to keep Mac Wilson sort of out in space, which is where he's better. Mac between the tackles just doesn't add up. It gives you some insurance. We don't know what Taki is. He didn't really get much of a chance last year. He could surprise us all, but he could be. But they had no answers there. And I think between him and Goodson, it gives you guys in the middle of that second level that at least are going to do the job. They're going to go out there. You're not going to have to worry about it. Probably not a lot of highlights coming out of them, but you're solid at that point. And when they lost Willie Gay, who they had apparently gotten the green light on, and Logan Wilson ahead of them, you can't really argue with that pick. It's a solid value pick at a position that they needed to grab somebody at.
How comfortable are you with, or how much do you think Jedrick Wills is going to be able to make the transition over left tackle? Are you pretty comfortable with what you've seen of him, and just the fact that for the last 2 years he's blocked Tua's blind side, and with Tua being a left-handed quarterback, do you get the sense that he's going to make that transition with as little problems as necessary?
I have long been, it's strange because I've long been, I'm in the middle. There are some people out there that think you can just switch sides like it's nothing. I mean, you see them on social media all the time. We'll just switch so-and-so over to the right and then it'll be fine. Okay, it's not that easy. There's a lot of NFL tackles out there. I think it was Mitchell Schwartz that said, but I could be wrong on that said trying to switch sides is like learning how to wipe your ass with the opposite hand. Go try that sometime and tell me how easy it is. But I think it comes down to each individual player, because there are guys who can do it with seemingly no problem. They flip-flop no problem and they can handle it. And then there are other guys, they're just not built that way. They learned, the technique and the footwork and everything on the right side or the left side, and the other side is just foreign to them. Now, I will say this. way back, and I remember saying this because when I started to hype up Jedrick Wills in like October, November, I got people saying, we need a left tackle, and I remember Dane Brugler specifically, somebody asked him, and he said, absolutely no problem, instant starter on either side. And I have since seen other people who know way more about it than I do say similar things. And then you look at the last couple of weeks, like we talked about when you guys had me on last week, Andrew Berry and Joe Thomas saying, right side, left side doesn't matter. A tackle is a tackle. That's not what we look at. And Joe Thomas specifically saying, yeah, I think he can make it and I will help him. I am not going to argue with Joe Thomas about how to play tackle in the NFL, okay? I mean, I will argue with a lot of people about a lot of things, but that's one I just know going in I'm going to lose. So if those guys all say it, who am I to argue? I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. Now, the COVID situation and the lack of practices and everything, that might throw a little monkey wrench into the beginning, because he's not going to get the reps that he would normally get with other people. Certainly he can work on the drills by himself, but, those practice reps and OTAs and all that kind of stuff, that's invaluable time. But, so there may be a few hitches if and when camp starts at the very beginning, but it'll give us something to yell at each other about over Twitter. But a long term, if they say it's going to be not a problem, then I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think it was Jason Pinkston was on Cleveland radio last week, and he transitioned from, I think he was right tackle in Pittsburgh to left guard. And he said that when he came in, it was during the lockout year, and his first time practicing was the first day of training camp. So all this lost time is going to be very invaluable to guys like Jedrick Wills and, any of these rookies, because the less time they get on the field, the harder it's going to be for them to transition to the NFL.
Yeah, and even the veterans. We see these videos every year through the spring of, oh, look, Baker and Jarvis are on a beach somewhere working out together, throwing routes, doing the thing. They don't do that because it's, a tax write-off. They do it because timing and learning, this wide receiver likes to break his routes off a little bit quicker, so the ball needs to be here. And that's stuff that you have to work on. So it's going to be interesting whenever it cranks back up. And God willing, it'll be in the fall and we'll all be safe, to see how much rust needs to be knocked off around the league, because there's going to be rust. There's just no way around that. But yeah, especially for the rookies, it's going to be very interesting. We're going to quickly find out, I think, which of them actually has been working on their own and which of them has not.
Steven, I want to ask you about Harrison Bryant, the tight end we picked up in the 4th round. Mm-hmm. From all the scouting reports I've read, he's not the best blocker, and I'm unfamiliar on how effective of a blocker Austin Hooper is. Does it worry you that there's not a real strong blocking tight end on this roster, or do you feel optimistic that one of these guys will emerge as that third tight end that can do some blocking for us?
Well, you have to do it in this offense, at least what we think it's going to be. So if they can't do it, I can't imagine this coaching staff is going to put them in a position, to go out there and fail. That said, as far as Bryant goes, yeah, it's not the strength of his game, but it's not for lack of effort. You watch him on tape and he puts his ass into it, and he doesn't have as much, as Pete would say, he doesn't have the ballast, he doesn't have the sand in his pants that you would like for that specific kind of thing, but it's not for lack of effort, and he's a young kid, so it's not a liability, but it's not something you want him doing on a regular basis. I'm just guessing here, but my guess would be he's going, at least early on, going to fill more of like a sort of a big slot role, sort of a pseudo wide receiver, 3 or 4 type thing for most of his duties, because that's where he shines. Everybody was kind of surprised a little bit by he ran kind of slow and his drills weren't all that great, because if you watch him on film, maybe he's one of those guys that just needs the bright lights. They're not great practice players, but when the lights come on, they shine, because when the ball's in the air, he just has this other gear that just comes out of nowhere, and he looks way faster than he tested. So I don't know if that had to do something with the new, everybody's throwing out the agility drills from Indy this year and everything was kind of wonky. Maybe it had something to do with that. I don't know. But you look at him on film and he seems to be a pretty damn good fit for this offense. Now, I will say, as far as tight ends go, another big double middle finger gun salute to Bill Belichick for taking not only my number one tight end that I wanted in Devin Asiasi, but my number two in Dalton Keene back-to-back last night. Screw you, Bill, if you're listening. But Harrison Bryant absolutely seems to fit what we think this offense is going to be pretty damn well.
I think it's clear that Belichick's listening, the Ravens are listening, and there might be others listening, because I've seen you were upset, Jake Burns was upset, that a lot of guys that you were hoping would end up in Cleveland ended up in Baltimore or New England or anywhere else.
Yeah, when the Steelers took Alex Highsmith, I almost threw something at my television. That's probably the worst place that he could, from our perspective, that he could have ended up, because he's got T.J. Watt to learn from, all four of the teams in our division, if you step back and look at it, all their draft classes as a whole had really good draft classes, which is great, but it's also frustrating from our perspective. So, I don't know if they're spying on us or what, or if, we're just getting lucky, but they seem to take a lot of guys that we all like.
Yeah, definitely. I thought all the teams in the AFC North fared out well, except Cincinnati. I felt like they should have invested more on the offensive line, because, you have a lot of skill talent there, but, and Jonah Williams is clearly going to come back, hopefully, but you have the quarterback now. You have to invest up front.
Yeah, I think that's what they're pinning their hopes on, and I tend to agree with them. Everybody said Jonah guard, he's a guard, and I disagreed with them. I thought he was fine at tackle last year, so if he's coming back and is going to be what they think, and I think that he could be, I think that's what they're pinning their hopes on. And I will say this, he's probably going to kick inside to guard, because that's where he played at the Senior Bowl, but great value pick for them in Adeniji. The kid from Kansas that they got. He played tackle at Kansas, but they moved him inside at the Senior Bowl, and he absolutely kicked ass up in Mobile for a week. So maybe that'll help too, because you look at them passing on left tackle, especially when you had Josh Jones or Ezra Cleveland or whoever it was staring him in the face there at the top of round 2 and the top of round 3. And, Myles Garrett just had to be licking his chops. So, but as a whole, I think their class was pretty darn good. And boy, did they grab a bunch of linebackers.
Yeah, this is just coming across by former Browns wide receiver Darren Cheverini. The Browns are signing touchdown Tony Brown, the Colorado wide receiver. So there's another undrafted free agent signing.
Okay, you know as much about him as I do.
That's all I know about him.
I know the Browns are signing him as a UDFA, and apparently he went to Colorado. That is the breadth of my scouting report at this point.
Well, Stephen, as we wrap up this draft coverage here, I wanted to get your kind of final take on this draft, and I want to see if I can limit you in doing it in 5 words or less. If you had 5 words to describe this Browns draft this year, and the UDFAs that you've heard of so far, how would you describe this Browns draft class?
I have the feeling that this is a very nice way of telling me not to ramble like I normally do. Is that what you're saying?
No. I just want like 5 separate words to describe this draft class and how you think Andrew Berry and crew did in their first year of doing this draft.
I can do that. I can do it in 5 words. Stick to plan, best fit.
I love it. And as we've seen this offseason plan unfold, I think we've all been pretty excited about what has gone on and the different moves that they have made, and they have done a fantastic job in adding pieces to this roster that does have a lot of talent to it. Hopefully the head coach works out, the scheme works out. Hopefully the guys that they brought in are able to contribute. As long as we can protect Baker Mayfield, keep him upright, that's 90% of the battle, and I think was majority of the problem last year. So I think they're well on their way to doing that, and let's just hope we can kind of get back to a sense of normal so we can actually play some football, get down to the stadium and cheer on these Browns, because I think that once we're able to do that, things are going to be so much better, not only just in our own lives, but just around the world too. If we could get back to a sense of normalcy with everything that's going on, that's just best for us all.
Absolutely, 100% couldn't agree with you more. Cohesive vision. What was the buzzword they were throwing around? Unity, all that kind of stuff. Everybody's moving it seems to be moving in the same direction. And with these stories that have leaked out about last year, everything that was going on, that's the problem. You're practicing plays all week and then calling plays that you haven't practiced. You're abandoning the game plan 3 plays in. You've got, guys running routes they haven't run before. You've got, you can't win from the stories that we've heard the way they did it last year. So just the fact that everyone is on the same page and they're communicating and they're drafting players that are the best fit, not only at value-wise, but for the system. I have to believe Stefanski and Woods have, rather loud voices in that draft room, and Barry is listening to them, but ultimately he's the decision maker, and they're all going in the same direction. And if you're not all rowing in the same direction, you're just going in a circle. So I think, like you said, if we can get back to normalcy and we can all go outside again, and they can actually play, I think we're in for some fun things on the North Shore this fall.
Well, Steven, we're going to wrap this up, and before we say goodbye, I want to thank you, because this has been another year of you doing the mock draft experiment. This has been year 4. You said you got some good things cooking up for year 5, and just the knowledge that you always bring to the podcast, the hard work you put in and year out, that we could throw out a prospect's name and you're able to say, oh, this guy does this, this, and this, and just the amount of work that you put in behind the scenes and everything that you do, it certainly doesn't go unnoticed. And there have been so many people in Brown's Twitter that work so hard, and you're definitely in the top of that list. And I just wanted to tell you thank you, and we absolutely truly appreciate it.
Well, that's very, very kind of you to say. I'm humbled, and it's weird to me that people enjoy what I do, because I just do it for fun, to amuse myself, and everybody seems to enjoy it. So I am grateful for the words you said, and I'm grateful for you always having me on, and I'm glad to be a part of the Cleveland Giraffe experience.
If you want to plug everything you got, where people can find you, go ahead and plug your comedy stuff. I know you did it last week, but go ahead and do it again in case you didn't hear a previous time when last week you were on.
You can follow me at Brown's Mock Draft, and from there I will, I tweet links to I have a couple comedy CDs, a brand new one that I put out just a couple of weeks ago. They're available for download on Apple Music and Amazon Music. I have the Stephen Thomas Comedy channel on Pandora. If you could subscribe to and like that, and then like my tracks within that, it always helps. I'm on Spotify for people that use Spotify. Just Google comedian Stephen Thomas, or search comedian Stephen Thomas within Spotify. I've got a CD on there as well, and that's about it. If you do that, since like Anthony said at the top of the show, I'm a little bit out of work right now because of COVID. That would help me out tremendously financially, and it wouldn't cost you a dime for the Pandora and Spotify stuff. I appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for being here and for on Twitter, and go Browns.
Absolutely. We're going to get on and out of here. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at The Dogline, and on Facebook as well. Be sure to follow Jack and me on Twitter at JackMcCurry08. Anthony Joki, JOKI is where you can find me. With all of that, we're going to get on and out of here. And most importantly, go Browns.